Welcome to Africa's Vision Network. My name is Omar Ashaka, your guest host. Our guest today, his name is Mr. Vaylon Whitehurst. The title of the program is called Pragmatic. Vaylon, welcome to Africa's Vision Network.
Thank you for having me.
It's really great to have you here. I'm looking forward to this interview. I wanted to ask you, Vaylon, am I pronouncing it correct?
Yes.
That's a very interesting name. Share with our audience if there's any history to that you might can share with us.
There actually isn't any history. I asked my mother before. It seems like a really just different name, but she said it's just something that came to her. So I've Googled and done my research, and I can't seem to find anything. So
Right. Not even on Google, huh?
nope.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Because usually sometimes people with unique names, they're usually destined for greatness, too.
I'd like to think that.
Okay. Well, look, the other thing, too, I asked you to come up with a title for the show. And I thought you came up with a very interesting title. And I know our producer was very happy because it was a one-word title, and it was Pragmatic. Can you share with us why did you choose that title?
Well, for me, pragmatic is, it's not only what I'm going for as far as my show that I'm working on right now, but also it's life in general. It's a sense of reality, being able to relate to that reality, the sense that we all have our own reality. So I felt like pragmatic was somewhat perfect for this.
Okay. And I'm sure as we go forward in the interview, maybe there'll be a connection as to why you chose Pragmatic. But Vaylon, you're a Bowie State University graduate. I'm saying you're a writer in the making.
Yes.
And you're a Christian. Let's talk about being a Bowie State graduate. When did you graduate from?
I graduated this past December of 2017.
Okay, and what was your major?
Communications.
Okay. Why communication?
Again, just that sense of reality, the way that the world is now with social media, and we've got Trump in office, and just the sense of being able to relate, whether it be with social media, TV shows, books, politics. Everything relates back to communications, even down to the simplest form of being able to communicate with one another. So I felt like that was the perfect way to go for me, being one that wants to be able to reach out to others and relate. I felt like communications was the way to go, and definitely opened the door as far as, getting to know the business side of production and writing and things to that effect. So.
Yes, because I know I was looking at your resume. You have here TV production, you have broadcast pro media ethics, broadcast law.
Yeah.
What did you find most interesting about broadcast law, from what you recall?
Honestly, that class I think that's what opened up everything for me. When I felt like communications was, I had somewhat of a broad perspective, and I was like, it's TV, social media. But when you realize that the law actually comes into play when you're talking about communications, the things that go into being behind cameras, television, the rules that you have to follow, the danger that you can be in if you don't follow certain rules. That class definitely showed me that when it comes to the real world, that communications is actually something that's taken extremely serious. And initially, when I changed my major to communications, because initially I was business administration, I think there was a sense that a lot of people around me felt like communications wasn't a serious major, or it was something that was considered too easy, or it wasn't anything in medicine or doctoral or things to that effect. So that class definitely opened up a lot.
Let me ask you this. I mean, that's an interesting point when you say there were those who thought communication wasn't relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Were you surprised about that?
A little bit, a little bit. When I changed my major, I felt like I was doing a good thing. So
Okay.
when you hear otherwise, it kind of takes you by surprise. But
Okay. Real quick, going through your resume, I also noticed that you had some of your major course work, computer apps and business. What was that like?
that class, it was the basics.
Okay.
Learning to use Microsoft Excel, things that I already had experience in, but just going deeper into it. Just the world of things that you can do with those apps, Microsoft Excel, Adobe, Final Cut Pro, Apple softwares, and things to that effect. Just being able to go deeper into that, and like I said, I had previous knowledge in those
Right.
things, but they wanted to really put you to the test and see what you could do with it, what you could make out of such software.
And
So
you were very receptive to all of this, right?
definitely.
Okay. Well, also here, I'm looking at this certifications and professional development. I tell you, Vaylon, you got some very interesting recognitions here. And for example, first of all, congratulations. I see you were on the Dean's list. Looks like from 2015 to 2018.
Yes. Yeah. It took a while,
Right.
but that's something that I'm very proud of. Like I came in 2013. I had developed somewhat of a work ethic over time. It didn't hit, immediately. Coming straight out of high school, I was kind of used to not studying and being able to pass classes, and I realized that college was a completely different beast. But I got a hold of it over time. So
Okay. You got the Student Affairs Leadership Award last year, 2016-17. What was that, briefly, what was that about?
basically, what that was, I ended up joining the Community Student Association. And with that, it's basically being able to connect commuters to campus on life. There's a lot of students that don't get the full, college effect. You come to school, you go to class, and then you go home. So being someone that lived on campus, it was somewhat my job to, whether it's be events or after school study programs and things to that effect, just to be able to make sure that everybody gets that sense of being able to connect with other people and network on a college campus. And I definitely got involved with CSA, and I guess me being able to network with a lot of different people and create different events that definitely brought a lot of people on campus together.
Okay.
I feel like that's what got me that award. So.
Well, Vaylon, I won't go through all of these because, a lot of great recognition, but I don't want to take up the whole show with all your recognition. I think that's great, but it's just great. Organization behavior, programming management chairperson, promotion marketing executive board member, a lot of great things. But I'm going to back up just a little bit too, because obviously, Vaylon, you've had some inspiration in your life for you to be such a focused young man. And I do want to acknowledge the fact that you do attend Bethesda Baptist Church in Washington, D.C. And I know your family, particularly your grandmother, Sister Keeling, and I know your mother and your grandmother. Tell us a little bit about how your Christian connection developed. Because, you were there as a young fellow, but excuse me, it's still with you now as a young man. And sometimes, people will stray away. Can you talk briefly about that phase of your life?
Yeah, I think, like you said, I was definitely brought up in Bethesda Baptist Church. My great grandmother mainly definitely instilled the Christian faith in me. And for a time, I did stray away, and I feel like that played a lot of a part in my college experience. And even now, I'm not where I want to be spiritually. I'm not where I could be spiritually, but it's always played a factor in just how I live my life, and the things that I don't do. And like I said, it's definitely something that I'm working on, but it's surely played a part in everything from what I'm into now with being able to network with others, the whole communications thing, and taking that as something that's serious in my life, to the show that I'm doing, and not directly related to Christianity in itself, but still keeping that in mind when doing such things. So.
Well, and clearly, so that was part of that very solid foundation that you seem to have. I know when we talked prior to coming on air, I think when you and I first talked last week, you mentioned some of the challenges that you experienced in college that you feel that maybe other students probably experienced and will experience some of those things. You want to briefly talk about that?
Yeah, for me, I think that, well, first I want to say that as you said before, I'm deep when it comes to how I think about things, and I think that's played a part in how I receive things that go on. So being at HBCU, historically black college, there was a lot of things that I became aware of that I wasn't aware of before, and whether that be from the student life to my professors, uh, I take things personally, and I feel like at times I have a moral obligation. And with that being said, there was at times I felt like there was an extreme pressure on me to to be able to do certain things, whether that's getting to be able to connect with the youth that come in on campus. When I became a junior, was reaching out to younger students. But it's 4 years worth of definitely a roller coaster ride. Okay. And like I said, that's from professors, classes that I felt could have been developed better, things that we felt like we should have been taught but weren't, professors that weren't necessarily engaged in student activity or the actual learning process, and just there for, I guess you would say, the money of just getting paid to be a professor. Like I said, for me, being one that thinks so deep into different things, right. It's like.
So when you mentioned pressure, was this kind of like self-induced pressure because of your expectations in terms of when you saw something that was coming up a little short, it was hard for you to accept that? Or
I mean, I had pressure that I put on myself. It was pressure that I received from members of my family. It was pressure that I kind of received from people that I knew that were back home that weren't in college. So yeah, like I said, there's plenty of different routes. But yeah,
well, that does sound like a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So what got you through that?
I had a very strong support system, and I think that was the main thing. For me, when I came in, I had the same 4 roommates from my whole 4 years at Bowie State, and those guys, though we thought differently about different aspects of life and college and whatever else, we still had a like-minded connection to where if I sat and I explained certain things to them, they'd get where I was coming from, and for them to be able to be strong enough to express themselves back to me, that helped a lot too. To know that there's somebody that relates, and that's even back to the whole me writing the show and the book. Right, yeah. When you have somebody around you that can relate to what it is that's going on, it takes some of the pressure off of you, definitely.
Okay, and we're going to talk about the book that you're writing and some of the other things. I want to quickly go back to the pressure, because sometimes, I remember when I was in college, and we had parties sometimes, and sometimes beyond, we didn't do a lot of drugs, thank God, but we had the parties, and then you had the fraternities, and then there were the ladies. I'm a graduate from Norfolk State, and we used to go over to Hampton University. But with all that pressure, did drugs ever cross your mind, or other things that could have been more damaging to you? Because sometimes pressure will push people in that direction.
Yeah, I'm proud to say that there's nothing that ever pushed me over the edge to where I wanted to, damage my body in any type of way. And I've been to, obviously the parties come with college and the college experience. It's not really my scene. I did it for a while, but after that, it's like, okay, this is old. But I never got pushed over the edge to that point. But
Well, one thing that suggests to me too, Valon, is that I want to ask you about self-esteem. Because I was reading just briefly a book, I think it was called The Rock of Soul, and I can't think of the author's name, a black woman. But she was talking about how self-esteem is such a challenge in the African American community. She even mentioned, because I think she was a professor at one of the Ivy League schools, and she talked about how she saw students who were smart, they even looked good physically, but many of them didn't feel worthy. So in terms of self-esteem, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, where would you say your self-esteem was while you were in college, and even now?
for me, I'd say a 10. Like I said, for me, I mean, self-esteem was never an issue. For me, like I said, it was just a pressure thing. And I'll say this, at a HBCU, being as though Bowie State is predominantly African American, down to when we have the police brutality things that's going on, or I attended my first protest when I was at Bowie State. It's more of a pressure thing. Self-esteem was never something that was an issue for me, but more or less the pressure, because when you have things such as police brutality, your mind state goes into what are we going to do about it. There's nobody there to blame. There's no back and forth. It's whether you're gonna sit there and you're gonna complain about what's going on, or you're gonna do something about it. And like I said, for me, I attended my first protest because at a point I realized that a lot of people around me, we got a lot of different things that's going on in the world, political world, and it was a lot of things that were made black versus white and things to that effect. And for me, I kind of took a step back, and I was like, okay, we're sitting here talking about it, but what are we actually going to do? You can't complain about something that you're not taking action on. So
Now, and I want to talk about this writing aspect this writing project you're working on. But when you did this analysis, even with your first protest, again, was this a self-inspection? Were there others you were talking to who helped shape your decision to protest? Or was that solely from you, based on your analysis and based on the depth of who you are?
honestly, the situation with the protest was I don't remember exactly. It was a major event that happened, and we had a lot of those going on at the time. But what got me was I'm active on social media, and a lot of people that I went to school with, were on Twitter and things to that effect. And we have the hashtags that trend, and like I said, it became a thing of, if I'm on Twitter and everybody around me is complaining, and I'm seeing on Twitter that we're hashtagging and we're doing all these other things, but nobody's actually stepping up to make a difference. And that's what kind of drew me into, okay, I should attend this protest. Excuse me. Because like I said, there's nothing that I can say to anybody else on Twitter or in person. If none of us are doing anything about it, there's really nothing to talk about.
Right.
So that ultimately, me and my friend, we got together and we were like, we've got to do our part, because if we don't, we're part of what's to blame. So
Was that a burden for you, deciding whether or not to protest, or not seeing others do anything? I mean, was it a burden that you feel like you had to lift off your shoulders, so to speak, by doing something, or?
I mean, for me, I just felt like I was doing my part.
Okay.
And whether that's big or small, just being able to try and make a difference is, like I said, I have an issue with sitting and complaining and not doing anything about it. It's somewhat contradictory. You can't complain about something that you're not attempting to change. So I felt like the only thing that I could do at that moment, being a full-time student, it was like, okay, we've got to do this protest. And when I got there, I think the most shocking part of it at that time, it was a protest. It was, I'll say, pro-black for lack of better words. But when I got there, it was actually more white males and females there protesting on our behalf. And I thought that was funny because for me it was like all of the people I knew, we were just on Twitter, just hashtagging, and who we're hashtagging against is actually here protesting for us. But yeah, just to be able to try and do my part.
That sounds sounds like that was a deep experience for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
And the reason I was asking questions along these lines is because you sound like, I mean, we've had Reverend Walter Fauntleroy on the show. We've had other folks who have the late Marion Barry. And your conversation and this desire to want to make a difference rather than just talk, it just made me think of them. Because I know time is moving, let's talk about this writing project that you're working on. Tell our audience a little bit about that.
So, I mean, again, it stems from the not being able to, you can't complain if you're not doing anything. And as far as the pressure aspect for me, I hate to keep things in my head. I feel like it drives me crazy. So to be able to take my experiences and put them on paper, that like I said, it releases pressure off of me. But at the same time, when it's finished, I feel like that'll help someone else in college, out of college, within the same age range that I was in, just to be able to move forward. A lot of the kind of things, the obstacles that I ran into in school, if I would have had a book to kind of guide me through those experiences, and not on a spiritual level, but just on a level of there's another African American kid that has been through these things.
Okay. Now that's an interesting point. As you were talking, I had a question in my mind, and you kind of answered it because you said as an African American kid who may have gone through or maybe going through something similar.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask you, the writing that you're going to do, is it just for African American students, or is it for all students, or?
I mean, for me, it's for everybody. But my perspective is from that of an African American student who's in college. But like I said, it's a thing of being able to relate. So anybody that, when it's finished, if you read it and you relate to it, that's kind of my goal. So.
Do you have a title for it?
Or
are you working on a title? Or
I'm still working on the
defining
title.
that?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
still working on it.
And the audience, would it be for universities, or would you just be in the general market in terms of once you finish the book? How would you promote it?
I think I would aim for universities first, but the general market as well, but mainly universities. I think when you're in college, you've got a lot of different things that are on your mind. You've got a lot of different obstacles that come up that you've never heard or seen of. So I would say mainly the universities, and not just HBCUs.
Okay.
Every school. But
do you have a mentor?
I don't.
Have you ever
I
had a
don't.
mentor?
No.
That's kind of interesting. And I try to make this show as real as possible, but I try to make it very meaningful also for those who might be watching, in particular young African American men. And you can tell me if you're comfortable with this question, because when you say you've never had any mentors,
Mm-hmm.
Whether male relatives in the family,
I mean, now I will say I have male relatives that are I would say active in my life. I wouldn't give them the mentor title. I mean, I know that I can reach out to my grandfather if there's anything that I really need to talk about. But for me, I've never really felt the need to do such. And that may be, part of the reason why I had so much pressure on me. But
yeah, I was going to say, that's pretty deep. You said you never felt the need.
Yeah.
Because you felt so independent that or was there some fear in reaching out? Or I mean, that's a deep comment, I think, when you say you didn't feel a need for a mentor, if I heard you correctly. And I'm not saying that's a negative. I mean, it also says that, I mean, you did say that your self-esteem was at a 10 when I said, what level would be. So you're very comfortable as to who you are.
Yes, definitely.
But do you ever find yourself reflecting and thinking, okay, what would be great if I had a certain man to talk to? Or
Yeah, it hasn't crossed my mind. Like I don't know if it's an independent thing or just my kind of willingness to tackle certain things myself, but I just never really felt the need to, reach out for that deep of a, mentorship type of thing.
okay. And Velan, I know you're a pretty young gentleman. This journey so far up to this point, have you ever felt fragile with your journey so far in life?
Not really.
So nothing has come your way that has made you feel inferior, fragile, or just falling to pieces, or anything like that?
No, I mean, I've had my instances where I've got a lot going on, and I may look left, and something may hit me from the right side, but it's never nothing to break or fold. Just kind of look to the side. And you're like, okay, wasn't expecting that, but what's next? What can we do about it? So,
Okay. Because that's, to me, a pretty fascinating formula that you have, because you don't deal with drugs, alcohol, things like that. You said, if I heard you correctly, a mentor is absent. So God has really gifted you to be that strong. And I think I told you this even when we were talking on the phone. That's why I was so excited about being able to interview you. How do you pass it on to, I'm not sure if you have any younger brothers. I think you do, right?
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I do.
Where you are in your journey, how do you pass, because your younger brother, is he 12 or 13?
He's
14?
17.
17?
Yep.
How do you pass on to him and prepare him to be able to go with the flow, so to speak, especially at 17?
Yeah. And before I answer this question, I will say that I won't act as if I haven't drank alcohol before, because I have, but it was not as a result of anything that has gone on in my life. So it's not like
well, look,
that
full,
type of thing.
Full transparency. I mean, when
Yeah,
I say when I was in school, I said we didn't do drugs, but look, everybody probably passed around a marijuana thing. So
yeah. So
but I didn't get hooked on it.
Yeah,
thank God.
nothing
Yeah,
hard or as a result of, okay, this is what I'm going to because of what's going on. Nothing like that.
Right. But look, excuse me, but see, this is what I appreciate about you. You wanted to make sure that the record was real clear.
Yes.
That
Yes, I am not perfect.
Yeah.
I will not paint that picture.
Yeah, none of us are, but that's what I appreciate about you. You want to make that clarification, so, and I can relate to that. But with your brother, in terms of preparing him, and
With my brother right now, my brother has his own thing going on, and again, and I think that's why I try to relate so much. For me, I've sat and had talks with my brother. It's hard because you can be willing to kind of reach out and be able to try and take what you've been through and express that as something that another can learn from. But they have to be receptive of that. And for me, I don't know if it's, maybe I have to kind of go deeper into what I've been into or what I've been through, or maybe how to explain it, or I'm not too sure. But I tried to talk to my brother before, and it.
okay. All right. Well, let me ask you this, Velan, real quick. I'm going to call a few names because you did say you didn't have mentors, but I'm just going to call a few names of some popular African American men, and if you can give me one or two, whatever thoughts come to your mind, I'll give you the name, and you just give me one or two words or a sentence, what you think. Excuse me. The first name is Ben Carson, Secretary Ben Carson.
Innovative. Maybe lost at times, but definitely.
Excuse me. Lost, and of course we know he was also the great surgeon over at Hopkins, and I know he's well known for separating, I think, Siamese twins.
Mhm.
Interesting word though when you say lost, because he's now currently the Secretary of HUD. Why would you say lost?
I That's not something that I'm too deep into, but I will say that early on, I read his book, and I read that when I was younger, and where he is now, as far as when I say lost, I mean as far as political stance and what people may have thought that he stood for, that now is shown otherwise. I think lost is a good word for it.
And actually, I agree with you, and that's why I was curious as to why you said it. Congressman John Lewis from Georgia.
I don't have enough information on him to make a comment.
All right. Bill Cosby.
It's crazy because Bill Cosby is actually somebody that I looked up to.
I'm sorry, was that past tense, or did you say look or looked?
Well, yeah, looked up to.
Okay.
And the only reason I say that is because, and I'll go briefly into it, the Bill Cosby Show. It was one of my favorite shows growing up, something that I still watch to this day. And I don't want to go too deep into it, but to see a black family together succeeding with a father in the household, just the positive energy of that show just did great things for me growing up, and like I said, I still watch it to this day. And I don't say looked up to as far as a past tense as if I lost that admiration, but obviously he's older now and he's not doing as much as he used to, but definitely a significant figure for me.
Jay-Z.
I don't like his music, but very insightful. He's got some great ideas as far as the African American population goes. Some of his recent interview that he did, I felt kind of opened my eyes a lot to a lot of different things that are going on. But he's a great figure. I'll give him that.
Oprah Winfrey.
I won't lie. When I think Oprah, I think of her money. But definitely a successful figure.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. If she was to run for president of the United States as a young gentleman, what would your thoughts be? I mean, even the mere thought of her possibly running, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I love the idea. I have no issue with a female president, let alone an African American female president. That'd be great. It would also depend on her political stances and things to that effect. But.
Okay. And the last person, of course, I want to get in a couple of young ladies. The last young lady I'll mention, just to see what your thoughts are, especially since you were a communication major, Omarosa, the former, I forgot her title with the white Trump's administration, but we all know she was on The Apprentice. And
I don't have enough background on her to make a comment.
Okay. So Vaylon, with your experiences, with the depth of who you are, has politics ever interested you?
Not really. I've got friends that are deeply into politics, and they've tried to sit me down and talk about it, and I'm like, all right, guys, it's just not my forte.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things we were talking about, you mentioned some of your colleagues, fellow graduates, who might be having issues finding a job, in particular in their major.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share with us a little bit about that? I mean, what is it like for them? Why do you think that that's happening, et cetera?
Uh, I'll say for Bowie State in general, and as we spoke before the show, uh, they hold a lot of career fairs, and there's a lot of networking opportunities, but it's something that you have to be willing to do on your own. Nobody's gonna come to you and reach out to you and bring these things to you that you should know. And with that being said, I think there's an expectation that when you graduate with a specific degree, that you're gonna get a job in that field. And I mean, even for me, I majored in communications, but I have an extensive background in administrative work and the medical field and things to that effect. And that I feel like that plays a part because even for me now, looking for a job in my major, when I apply for a communications position, and they look at my resume and they see that I majored in communications and I may have done 2 or 3 years worth of work in communications. Also have 8 years worth of work in the administrative outreach, medical field. So I think just that there's an expectation, but it's a false reality that when you come out, you'll be where you want to be.
But is that a false reality for graduates from universities like Bowie State? What is that? Does the graduate from Yale and Harvard, in your opinion, do they face that same false reality?
I think it depends on what field you're in. I will say that when you're say you're in the medical field, they have programs to where when you come out, you're in an apprenticeship program or you're shadowing somebody that whose position you want to be in the future. And with majors such as that, it's not really an issue. But when you're a communications major or a business major, because it's so broad, it's a lot more difficult, and you have to do a lot more work as far as networking.
Okay. Well, one of the things I was probably trying to fill you out with as well, because I try to be a straight shooter on the show. Do you think race has anything to do with it? And when I compare Bowie State to Harvard and Yale, and even my alma mater, Norfolk State, I mean, it's a small black school, and I was just wondering, from a young perspective, does race kind of create those issues in terms of finding a job with your major, from your perspective?
I feel like they can, and for me, and I'll say this: I've been on an interview for a job before, and I was actually in school, and I don't quite remember the position, but basically I went over a phone interview with a guy, and he was the hiring manager, and we went through my background and my resume and things to that effect, and he sounded, he sounded impressed. He was like, I want to bring you in. Let me know when you're done with school, things to that effect, and we'll work something out. And I called him, and obviously over the phone, you may or may not be able to tell that I'm an African American male. But when I got there, I was the only black guy in the office. It was a predominantly white workspace. The company was predominantly white. Like I said, when I came in, I was the only black guy there, and his everything changed at that point. His how interested he was in offering me the position was obviously gone at that point. We sat in the room, we talked, and rather than I have this position for you and I'll bring you in, turned into, we'll get back with you and I'll call you. And we shook hands and I left, and that was that. And at no point had I ever heard from it again. So.
But when you were sitting in there with him, was it clear to you as to maybe why things had changed, or?
At that point, I felt like it was race, and
Okay.
and I've done a lot of interviews, and at no point have I felt like race was an issue. But in that instance, it was, he made it very obvious that he was no longer interested.
So what did you learn from that experience? And this writing that you're going to do to help other students. I mean, if you're preparing someone to go on an interview and knowing that they can encounter that kind of experience, what did you learn from that, and how would you advise someone?
I mean, for me, it was like, it's not like my experiences that he was impressed with had changed once I got in the door. So that's where self-esteem comes in. You can't take that as something's wrong with me, or my resume is an issue, or there's specific things that I did wrong. You have to realize that there's going to be instances where race is an issue for some people, and like I said, he made it very obvious. But it wasn't something that hindered me or my progress or how I thought about myself or my experiences, resume, anything
Right.
to that effect. It was a wake up call.
Yeah. And what I might add for consideration, when you do this writing, it is something you might want to consider because you're right. If your self-esteem is in check, then you're going to be okay. But I remember I had one of my cousins graduated from Hampton University, and she had an interview. She felt she was well qualified, but she was devastated when she didn't get the job. Now, I don't know if her self-esteem would have been at a 10. I knew it wouldn't be any lower than a 5 or 6 because, her parents had groomed her. But maybe if you're not really prepared for that, that can devastate you. So, so when you're doing your writing, if that crosses your mind, then that's something you might want to consider. Let me ask you this. I'm going to use this term, and you can tell me, what your thoughts are, because I know you had these business courses. Cryptocurrency. When I mention that to you, what thought goes through your mind? Cryptocurrency.
Um, yeah, for me, is right now with the cryptocurrencies, the bitcoins and things of that effect. The first thing that comes to mind to me is investments, and it's amazing the things that are kind of I guess growing and expanding at this point, for lack of a better term, but investments.
Okay.
Because when there's conversation about cryptocurrency, bitcoins, and things to that effect, at least conversations that I've had, it's always about the investment market and how these things are, changing our society and, the currency aspect. So just the investment part for me is
Okay.
what.
Well, it's good to hear that. You can relate to the term because some people can't.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I'll be honest. It's kind of new to me.
Mm-hmm.
But again, what we try to do on this show is expose people to different things. I shop on Craigslist sometime, and I was surprised to see that there's a little block on Craigslist. If you want to pay in cryptocurrency, you can do that. And I got a story, and I'll try not to mess it up, but from what I understand, many years ago, 50 Cent, I think back in 2008 or something, got a few pieces of Bitcoins, and the value of it was so extreme. But I'm just kind of bringing that out, and I'm glad to hear that it's on your radar screen. Your friends are talking about it, because I also read where Amazon is thinking about using cryptocurrency. So just wanted to kind of drop that term for any viewers who might be out there, and maybe they'll do some research, because sometimes we as African Americans, we get information a little later. We're not totally informed. So I'm just so impressed with the fact that you know that you are a deep young man, and how you've gotten there, and the fact that your self-esteem is where it is, and it sounds as though you've done it a lot on your own. Do you read a lot?
I don't.
Well, that's
I
interesting.
probably should read more. I've tried to get into reading different books and things to that effect. It's hard to get my attention when it comes to reading, but that's something that I'm trying to get into in the near future.
Okay. So Vaylon, with the young African American, young professionals, so to speak, what's the thinking like in terms of the future of African Americans from your perspective? We still see, and I'm not trying to stereotype, but we still see, killings, a lot of shootings in our community. What are your thoughts, especially as a young man who's gone to college and you want to make a difference? You don't want to just sit there. You want to be a voice. So when you see these shootings in our communities, tell us what are your thoughts, and how do you feel?
For me, obviously number one is it's an unfortunate thing that happens as far as shootings go. Whether it's a shooting, stabbing, any type of violence is kind of it hinders us. I feel like in going forward, and I've always said this to like my roommates and things to that effect, but there's a level of misunderstanding. There's a lack of knowledge as far as what we can do in our communities moving forward. And like I said, I have a lot of friends throughout the Hyattsville area, and I had one friend who he was incarcerated when I went into Bowie State. My sophomore year, he got out, and he reached out to me, and he asked me for money, and I kind of let him know. I was like, hey man, I'm in college, I don't have money. College is not, you don't go to school and they just give you money. It doesn't work like that. And he took offense to the fact that I didn't have money to give him, because he was under the impression that because I was in school that I had some level of, obviously something was lucrative about being in college or being a college student. And it's unfortunate, but it's a level of ignorance, but it's something that, for me, if to graduate from Bowie State, I have to be able to go back into the community and kind of spread that knowledge. There's a misconception of what happens when you go to college, what you get out of college, what college is for, why you should or should not go to college, and that plays a part in everything from instances like that, and even the shootings and the stabbings. It hinders us moving forward. And another example, there was a group of guys that I used to play basketball with, and I would always go across the street from my grandmother's house, and it wasn't the worst neighborhood, but it definitely wasn't one of the best that you would want to just be in at like all the time. And one thing that got me was one guy. I don't know if we were having a conversation about college or something to that effect, but somebody asked him, because I believe his brother was, he may have got shot or stabbed. He didn't die, but he was severely wounded. He was in the hospital, and somebody asked him, why haven't you moved out of this area? And his response was, because I can't. And when you hear things like that, and I've had conversations with guys, and they're like, I want to further my education, but I can't, or I don't have the money to do so. They had no idea that there were things such as loans, or grants, or scholarships, or money that they can get from just by having good grades in high school. Things like that they weren't aware of. And it's unfortunate when you hear that. And so for me, on my end, being that I've been in both situations, it's like, okay, obviously there's information that isn't being spread or given out, and that's where the moral obligation for me kicks in.
Okay, and that sounds like that would be an area of focus in your writing. Mm. Yeah, because as you were describing to me, someone saying I can't, I thought about self-esteem, and I thought about what I read in this book, how people don't feel worthy. And that's a very profound challenge, I think, in African-American communities. My young daughter, Zora, who's just turned 11, she has a young friend who I was asking, I said, does he have any brothers? She said, yes, but she said 2 of his brothers were murdered. And she was saying her young friend, he tried to cut his wrists. Mm-hmm. And I guess and I'm kind of straying away from my initial question, but I raised that question because the impact that it's having on our community is just amazing. And when I hear that a young 11-year-old boy, because of he has lost his brothers through shootings, killings, slashed his wrist, is just a little example of some of the things that's going on in our community. And so your writing, yes, to prepare for some, it sounds like it may focus in on those who are going to college, but maybe even further. Because obviously, Velan, you're evolving yourself as a person. I mean, this deepness that you have is going to get even deeper. Would you agree?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, right now I feel like I'm a shell of myself, and I'm still working to be a better person, to kind of mold into who I really want to be, and being able to help other people, and that's something that a lot of people say as a cliche, but being in the situations that I've been in, and far beyond the book, even on my phone I have notes of different things that I want to do, and one is being able to build a community center, but a free community center, because as relating back to the shootings and the killings and things to that effect, a lot of kids don't have anything else to get into. And when you're in the mindset of, I can't get out of this neighborhood and there's nothing else that I can do past this, then the shootings and the killings and the stabbings, those things don't really process as, what am I doing? They kind of process as, okay, it doesn't matter because this is where I'm going to be anyway. So to be able to kind of develop something that can be an out for someone is surely something on my list. And like I said, that's far beyond the book. But
okay. Well, we also know, Velan, when individuals go to college, sometimes they expect to graduate, and sometimes they expect to make X number of dollars.
yeah.
So where do you stand in terms of money, in terms of materialism and things like that? Because a lot of times that's where crime comes from. People want this, that, and the other, etc.
For me, as far as materialism goes, that I'm actually at like an all-time low as far as, material possessions. And for me right now, my main thing is, I know that I want to be able to make a certain amount of money, because not for the material things, but because that'll open up the gates for everything else that I want to do. Whether that be a community center, investing in different markets, the book, and things to that effect. You need money to make money. So as far as that goes, there's a little bit of pressure for me, and obviously it's been hard finding a job, and even for me in my major. And every now and again, I'll be at the computer and I'll be applying to jobs, and I'll kind of sit back and I'm like, I need a job today so I can pay for everything it is that I need to pay for, so I can do this and that. And, thank God for my girlfriend, because she's like, hey, take your own advice. Like, something's good's going to come for you. So
Right.
I need that every now and again.
Okay.
But
And I'm smiling because I just got a cue. We're a little past short of 5 minutes. And it's interesting you mentioned your girlfriend, who I met. Taisha is her name?
Tice, yep.
Yeah. I don't want to put you on the spot, and you don't have to answer this if you don't. But how important is that relationship to you, considering you're an exception in the sense that you're very deep, in a couple words? And you can pass if you want to.
No, it's extremely important.
Okay.
I think sometimes she hates how deep I go into things, but
Right.
she definitely plays a huge part in everything that I have going on.
Okay,
So.
well, great. Look, I know we're wrapping it down, and time is running out. But I have to ask you this: as a young African American, President Donald Trump. Can you briefly give us your analysis of President Trump in terms of how he is impacting America, how he's impacting African Americans, and if you can do that kind of briefly.
For me, it's simple. Though we don't need him in office right now, I feel like one thing that he has done is he's connected not only the African American community, but also those who voted for him, who expected one thing, and got else, something else. I feel like he did a good job at bringing us together, because I think everybody has somewhat of one thing in common now, and it's that we don't want him in office, and that he's openly, it's a open level of hate, and I don't think that's something that we've seen and it's being tolerated. So he's brought everybody together. So
Christians in today's society, is there a bigger role for Christians to play, or what?
I feel like that could go either way, but I'd say for sure. I think everybody has a bigger role to play right now.
Okay. Well, Vaylon, I just got the 3-minute cue, and first of all, I want to thank you for coming on the show, especially on such a short notice. But can you also, within a couple minutes or less, speak to the young individuals who might be watching this show, especially the young African-American male, but the young African-American female as well, especially when it comes to self-esteem and believing in oneself. Can you just, as though, I mean, your experience with the camera, as though you're speaking directly to those individuals?
Sure. For me, just, we're living in a world right now where there's a lot of different things that can hinder what it is that you want to do. There's a lot of outside voices. The level of social media and things of that effect are wide open, but you have to remember who you are, what your motives are, what it is that you want to do with your life, and you can't let anybody get in the way of that. So,
And how important is love, whether it's family love, marital love? Can you comment on that real quick?
All I can say is love is key. Love is the key right now with everything. So.
Okay. Well, Vaylon, we at Africa's Vision Network, we want to wish you the best with your writing. And like I said, you sound so much like the late Marion Barry. You sound so much like Reverend Fauntleroy in your own right. God obviously has a purpose for you, and I want to thank your mother, your grandmother, your great-grandmother, and all your family, because I've observed how they are and their wonderful family. So we want to say God bless you, and I want to say a special thank you to Thais as well,
Yeah.
because a good man needs a good lady, and a good lady needs a good man. So God bless you, and we're going to try to have you back on the show, but we wish you only the best in the future.
Thank you for having me.
And we want to thank our viewers for watching, and please stay tuned for our next program. Thank you.